Vegas,
in the
baby.
next week, baby. Let's go.
Vegas, baby. Right, let's start there because your article yesterday in the Sydney Morning Herald is something that I referred to on a couple of things. You chat with Fletch over there about trying to get the Americans to not call it rugby. I think it's actually spot on, and we had some fun with it yesterday about terms that do your head in sport, and one of them is, especially those south of the border, referring to rugby league as rugby. But I reckon it's a really key marketing point, which is what this whole thing is about. Plus, what you also wrote about it being, will Americans fall in love, or will Australians in America fall in love with the game like we have, get up at 2 a.m. to watch the app that they've bought, which is what the NRL's trying to do, and whether or not their multi gets up. In a nutshell, in that sentence, I said to my audience yesterday, you've nailed the main reason why we're going first time around.
That's right. But this is what it's always been about. It's always been about broadcasting and wagering, and like we've been writing about it at the Herald since April last year. I mean, look, I've got some reservations about rugby league games being put on at certain times as wagering product, which is what it essentially is. But kudos to the NRL. I know it's a very bold and ambitious move, but the game always seems to revel when it's taking a risk. They did it with Origin. They did it with the Tina Turner campaign. All Stars, when it first started, was a great concept, although it seems to be getting squeezed more and more out of the schedule with every year. But good on Peter V'landys and Andrew Abdo for being so proactive. The only thing is, we're not going to know for 5 to maybe 10 years whether it's a success. And our clubs and all the other stakeholders in the game at the moment, the New South Wales Rugby League and the QRL have taken the NRL to court over funding last year and also this year. Are we going to be prepared to be cutting corners in terms of funding to certain parts of the game to fund this big, expensive experiment in the US? That's going to be the big question.
If we're still going in 5 years.
If we're still going in 5
then
years.
It's
they've got an agreement with the Nevada Tourism Commission for 5 years, but I don't think it's I don't think whether the NRL is prepared to stay the course. That's the big question. And if I know rugby league, if people are having to pay more than what they're expected to pay, like in terms of clubs and whatnot, then that's when they'll start barking about not wanting to do it. That's what a lot of the concerns of the 4 clubs a couple of weeks ago was about, when they wanted to meet with V'landys and Abdo, because it was just costing them a packet.
But do you think, if we are still going, and I'm not saying that we won't still be going in 3 or 4 or 5 years' time, but I think that's probably the benchmark for success, because it's survival of the fittest over there, mate, as you know. And plenty of sports go over there and with big ideas and last a year or two and get eaten up and spat out for various reasons. So if rugby league is still there and still going in 5 years, whether or not they've made a profit on the thing, I would think that'd be the first marker in that marketplace to say that we're on the right track.
That's right. But it's, again, as I said, we're not going to know until that, until the rivers of gold start flowing in from the wagering market, where it's absolutely exploding in the US. I think it's $100 billion US is what they wagered last year on sports betting. $100 billion US. So that's good coin.
So you get a piece of that, and you're laughing.
That's the plan, right?
Yeah.
But that, again, I'm a hard-bitten journo. I'm skeptical, I've got to say. Is it going to work? Who knows? But, you've got to applaud them for having a go.
Do you remember when this first came about and we were sitting in our studios and we were having this discussion, and both you and I said the same thing? I mean, you're a lot closer to rugby league than I have been over a long time, but we've both been around the block, and we both said at the same time...
You've been around the block much longer than me.
Hang on.
You're significantly older.
I just drive around it a lot. You walk around it so much. You take more steps. I just sort of skim past, if you know what I mean. But what I'm saying is we both sat there and went, we'll believe it when we see it.
That's right.
So now we've got to believe it, and I do believe it. I mean,
how many years have we been talking about games in the US?
Yeah.
That's been like the ultimate off-season story for decades.
But I reckon story...
It's amazing that it's actually happening.
The story then was, let's go to the US, like we did in 87 with State of Origin. Let's go to the US and they'll fall in love with the game. That was it. There was no other strategy behind it. At least we know now what the strategy is behind this, which is essentially broadcasting and wagering in its various forms. So now there's something physical and an outcome to attach to it, which has now given me a reason to believe in the reasons why they want to
You know
go.
why there's reason to believe?
Yes.
Because Peter V'landys is great mates with Lachlan Murdoch. And Lachlan Murdoch is the executive chair of Fox in the US.
He's the big daddy.
And
yeah.
so you talk to everyone in America that I know, they reckon, like even all the way through the NFL playoffs, it was getting pumped on Fox Sports 1 in the US continuously. So people often talk about Peter V'landys' close relationship with News Corp. I've written about it many times myself. But it's obviously an advantage, particularly when it comes to something like this. So if V'landys can't get it done in the next 5 years, then we should pack up and not even think about it ever again. Because if you can't do it with Lachlan Murdoch on side, then when are you going to be able to do it?
Never. Never. Exactly. I'll talk about Peter V'landys in just a sec. But while we're on Vegas, aside from what's going to happen outside of the games themselves, I reckon what's going to happen in Allegiant Stadium could well and truly determine the success. And it's going to be a hard one, mate. We've had this chat. I've spoken to coaches, I've spoken to players, I've spoken to experts. The fact of the matter is that the ground is going to be shorter. It's going to be smaller all round. So the game is going to have to adapt. And I reckon we're going to see, from what I'm told, a lot in the middle.
Of course.
A lot of play in the middle here. So if you're the marketing side of PVL, you want the biggest, most entertaining product you can get. How do you get that? Tries and spectacular tries. So how do you then balance, and do you think that we're going to see two games there that are going to be short on points and short on spectacular tries? Because at the end of the day, those four coaches that are going are only interested in 2 points.
They are.
They're not thinking about the bigger picture of the game.
They are.
They're interested in that 80 minutes of 2 points.
Matty Johns has talked about it on his show on SEN quite a few times, just about the importance of the referee and particularly about the 10 metres. So he needs to keep them apart, whoever the referee is in both those games. I think that's going to be fundamental to it. Let's hope they maybe put the whistle away. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot more set restarts. But I've been down there on the ground, on the surface down there, and it's going to be interesting because they are right on top, like they're up. They're elevated, that first row. You're elevated and you're right on top of them. So I remember when we went on that promo tour, being on the ground down on the ground with Billy Walters from the Broncos. He didn't seem to think being down there on the field that it was going to make that much of a difference. The thing that I was looking at, if like say Nathan Cleary or Matt Burton come in, end up playing there in the next
roof
is the roof.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was surprised about how that was the first thing that struck me, just how low the roof was. So, and I said to Billy, I said, "What do you reckon of the roof?" He said, "Mate, Matt Burton and Nathan Cleary could easily touch that." So what happens then?
I don't know. What
What
the
happens
rule?
what's the rule for you to roof?
Well, what's the rule in cricket? Because we had that rule remember when they started playing at Docklands
That's right.
down there as well.
Well, they've had. I'm pretty sure they've had an origin there with the roof shut.
What happens when it hits
I can be correct.
spider cam? Because it'd be
I don't know that
the
either.
same thing. Yeah, we'll get our...
You know what? I struggle to keep up with all the new rules year to year in the NRL. I don't know what the spider cam / retractable roof rule is in the National Rugby League, but I'll get onto it now.
I didn't know how much of an impact the smaller ground was going to have until I started hearing from those that are going over and knowing that they're drawing, that they're painting...
They're training on.
They're training for it.
Manly been doing it for a while.
Yep.
South started doing it,
and they're structuring
I'd be
their
surprised
plays.
the other two didn't as well.
Yeah, structuring their plays specifically for it. So,
But that said though, like there's players like, it won't matter what the dimensions are. Players like a Tommy Turbo, he trucks through the middle anyway.
well, Turbo's an interesting one because what'll happen there is he'll get the free range, which is what he's got, to swoop side to side. If they're going to play up the middle, they'll play a left-right tackle 5 combination.
I think he's just as dangerous through the middle. That's where he does a lot of his good work.
And I think
Someone's will do a lot of our best work at the nightclubs afterwards. But he'll
Straight
go
through
straight
the
through the
middle.
middle of the Legion Stadium. But Reece Walsh, it doesn't matter what he could be playing in a phone box and he'd still be hard to tackle.
Good point. Good point.
You like that line? That's not a bad line, is
You're
it?
going to be there next week, right?
This show next week, I will be live and exclusive
On the morning show.
in somewhere.
So you
in Las
land
Vegas.
Tuesday morning Vegas time.
Yes.
You'll pick up the phone to us Tuesday afternoon, which would be obviously
It'll be 2
this
o'clock,
time.
2 o'clock Vegas time.
Right. What chance we speak to you in the hotel, or are you already out by
I'll
then?
be out and about, sussing things out,
Setting the scene
setting the scene, taking the temperature.
at the Elvis Chapel, perhaps.
Maybe. Maybe at a certain blackjack table. You know what I've got to do though, this is how good a trip it was last year. When I got home, I opened up my bag and went, oh, I was taking things out and went, oh, there's $200 of chips I didn't, from the Park
Didn't cash in?
MGM, I didn't cash in.
Oh, you better take them back.
I better try and double it.
See if you can get it. Have you got to go to the consulate? And
Throw that out to the text line. How should I spend that?
How much you got?
I got 200, exactly 200 in chips.
200 in chips. Are you going to cash them in and spend them, or are you going to spend them?
I had some stupid idea. I was just going to go and put it all on red at the roulette table.
Fair enough.
Because I know one thing. I'm not good at blackjack. They were mocking me.
Mate,
I was getting mocked. I was getting that. You know why I've got those chips? Because I was getting mocked at the table by the dealer about how bad I was.
Really?
Yeah.
Bullied by the dealer?
I was getting bullied, and I ended up just said, "Give me my chips. You can go jam it."
Righto. Here's our challenge.
Where's your boss? And then you know what? And then I couldn't.
Your boss?
No, I didn't. And then I was going. I couldn't find where to cash them in.
No, well, it's almost as hard as finding the exit door.
The exits and the
clock.
You can find the ATMs, okay?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
The ATMs and the bar girls.
All right, so you got $200 in chips.
Yep.
Only at the MGM. Obviously, you can't
Park
go.
Park MGM.
Park MGM. So we need some good advice for where you're going to spend or how you're going to spend that 200. If not, double it up.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to gamble responsibly. 0457 736 736. Webby's back in the house. I'm going to have a chat about Peter V'landys after this.
Go Dogs.
Peter V'landys. So 3 more years as ARLC chair, which is an obvious choice. What I'm interested in is, and he's made some noise about, will I see it out? Probably not, or maybe no. So classic PVL.
It was him very much talking out loud.
Yeah. Which is fair enough.
Which is what he does. That's what makes him so... It can be so mind-numbingly frustrating for the game because he just speaks out loud to whoever calls him, whichever reporter decides to dial his numbers. But he's also very open and honest, and you know where you stand with him.
If we did a health check pre-COVID or at COVID on the state of rugby league and did a health check now, it's markedly different, right? It is. It's almost at the opposite end of the scale in terms of how good the patient is. The patient is up and kicking, whereas it was not looking too good there. How much would you put that down in a percentage term to the leadership of Peter V'landys?
A lot, particularly in terms of the game's finances. So I think he's talking about $700 million revenues a year. And the way that he's gone about building up an asset base, I know exactly who he would have been talking to. It would have been Nick Politis, who V'landys is very close to. They come from the same island in Greece. They're very, very tight. I think Nick had a big role in V'landys getting onto the commission in the first place and becoming chair, replacing Peter Beattie. Even though Peter Beattie sort of saw V'landys as the next successor. But like Nick, V'landys at a Ricky Stewart Foundation lunch a couple of weeks ago called Nick the godfather of rugby league. So I'm sure all the other clubs who are paranoid about the Roosters getting a saloon run at the NRL, that wouldn't have made them very paranoid at all. People in rugby league aren't very paranoid. But Nick was beating on for years, particularly to David Gallop, saying we don't have an asset. They don't even own the asset at Moore Park, the League Central. So Nick was going on and on about it, as a smart businessman would, like someone like Nick who's worth $2.5 billion. You know, maybe they should have listened to him earlier. And V'landys, I reckon, is just doing what Nick said to build up an asset base, which you'd think every major sporting organisation would look to do. He's made some, like, I've got to say this, though. They're very good at patting themselves on the back, the NRL, and I think the credit that they take, they seem to think that the rugby league was absolutely rubbish before the 6-to-go rule came in. There was some rubbish games. There's some rubbish games now. So I don't think, they keep saying that the 6-to-go rule has completely eliminated wrestling from the game. They must be watching a different game to me when there's three men into the tackle and some of the stuff that happens in the ruck, and depending on the referee and the conditions and the team, there's still just as much wrestling at times as there was pre-set restarts. I like to think the players and the clubs have a little bit to do with the success of the on-field product too.
Yeah. No doubt about it. On the term of wrestling, we can have a discussion after the news about the crusher tackle and what we saw with Toff Sipley and Dom Young and the outcome of that. We had a good discussion throughout the week about that and where it comes from and all of those kind of things. So I'll talk about that in just a sec. But just a quick one to wrap up the PVL. And this is the interesting part. So the obvious one is, okay, who's next? Right? There are plenty of good administrators around, but are there administrators like Peter V'landys? No, they're not.
No.
And I reckon two names that you just said in this conversation in the first half hour, Lachlan Murdoch, pick up the phone, he's there. Nick Pilates, pick up the phone, he's there. Who's the rugby league equivalent of Peter V'landys if PVL decides tomorrow that he's not going to be there, that can not only stir up the game like it can, iron out problems like it can, build that asset base, but have those kind of people in his corner
It depends
or her
on,
corner?
but it depends on whether, like, but V'landys runs it. I know there's been a lot of talk. There's been some club CEOs who have told me directly they wish he was the executive chair because that's basically how he operates. He runs so much of the NRL at Racing New South Wales, it's not funny. There's been a lot. The drums have been beating for Andrew Abdo a little bit in the off season. I think there's been a bit of dissatisfaction amongst a few of the stakeholders in the game. But if you're not going to have V'landys, then you need to have a CEO that's very strong and can operate like a normal CEO. So it depends on that combination. I think, like he mentioned Kate Jones in the paper today. I know he's a big fan of Kate Jones, the former Queensland minister.
Yep.
It's funny, when they set up the independent commission, they said no politicians at all, and we've got two on there.
Hey, that's rugby league.
That is. But I reckon I wouldn't be surprised if you push someone like a Nick Pappas from South, and then if Abdo can step up and just be that really, that figurehead CEO that in a traditional way, working under a chairman that steps into the background. Who's the AFL chair? You don't know, really. You know, he's a force of nature, PVL.
Yes, it's definitely
for good and bad.
A combination. 0457 736 736 is the text line. Webby's back with us after the news.